And again, Mr. Tillerson, thanks for your willingness to be patient and answer the questions as you have with candor, and appreciate your willingness to serve. One thing we didn't talk about this morning in my questions was the Middle East. And I know you've had a lot of experience in the Middle East, particularly you've done business in many of the Arab countries. We talked about this a little in our meeting, but this relationship we have with Israel is a special one, of course. It's a cornerstone of our strategy in the Middle East. They are our greatest ally in the Middle East, the one true democracy. I want to talk to you a little about your views on Israel and the U.S.-Israel relationship. One important issue for me, as you know, is this issue of boycott, divestment, and sanction movement, the so-called BDS movement, which is a global movement targeting Israel. I've been concerned about this for a while. We introduced some legislation on it. In fact, Ben Cardin and I have not just introduced, but passed legislation in this regard to try to push back against the BDS forces. Recently, of course, with the consent of the Obama administration, the UN Security Council passed this resolution condemning the settlements and demanding Israel cease all activities in the occupied Palestinian territories, including East Jerusalem, is the way the resolution reads. I think this will no doubt galvanize additional BDS activity. And so here's my question to you. Would you make it a priority to counter boycott, divestment, and sanctions efforts against Israel? Make sure Israel is not held to a double standard, but instead treated as a normal member of the international community?
Yes, I would.
Any preliminary thoughts as to how you would do that?
Well, I think just by raising it in our interactions with countries that do put in place provisions that boycott whatever elements of activity or business with Israel in their country, that we begin by highlighting that we oppose that and just expressing that view, and that those countries need to understand that it does shade our view of them as well then. One of the things that would, I think, help change the dynamic, obviously, would be if there were a change in the dynamic regionally. Today, because of Iran and the threat that Iran poses, we now find that Israel, the U.S., and the Arab neighbors in the region all share the same enemy. And this gives us an opportunity to discuss things that previously, I think, could not have been discussed.
Do you find more support among the Sunni countries in the region for Israel as a result of that new dynamic?
I don't want to speak for them, Senator, but I think clearly there's much more sharing going on between the leaders of those countries as they confront this singular threat to the whole region.
That's my sense, and I think it's an opportunity. On BDS, we do have legislation that ties trade negotiations to dismantling BDS, and would you support that legislation? It's law of the land, and as we conduct trade negotiations, would you support using those negotiations to help dismantle the BDS efforts in those countries?
From the standpoint of the State Department's view, if confirmed, I would advocate for that position as well, recognizing there's other agencies that will really have the purview over that.
What attitude do you take toward the UN initiatives relating to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict? Is it your intention to press the Palestinians to resume negotiations with Israel rather than seeking to negotiate through international bodies such as the UN? What's your position on that?
I think, as I've expressed in answers to a couple other questions, I don't want to be brief because I realize we're trying to get through questions quickly. This issue has to be settled between the Israelis and the Palestinians, and no one can be coerced into coming to the negotiating table. That will not lead to a solution. So I support the parties being allowed to deal with this, speaking for themselves.
With regard to Syria, complicated, obviously. In my view, it's been made worse by our inaction and specifically drawing red lines and not honoring them, but also not establishing safe zones and no-fly zones. And as you know, Russia's entry into Syria's civil war has helped turn the tide decisively. So Iran was strongly backing Assad, and now you have Russia more involved. And this Assad or Iran Hezbollah axis has been strengthened. And yet, as an indication of how complicated it is over there, an enemy of that axis, of course, would be ISIS. One of my questions for you is, would you, under any circumstances, advise any sort of cooperation with Iran where we might have a confluence of interest, namely in confronting ISIS?
That's an area that requires exploration. I think, and then earlier I indicated that that's where we've got to find a way to engage in the overall peace process, or the ceasefire process, that's been agreed by Russia, Turkey, Syria, and with Iran's involvement as well. Can we get engaged in that? Can we at least stabilize the situation regarding the rebel activity with the Syrian government and turn all our attention on ISIS? That remains to be seen, and that will involve, obviously, the engagement of others as well, and input from others as well.
Do you think Russia has an interest or desire in this conflict to push back against ISIS, or do you think they're simply in Syria to help Assad's regime?
I think it has provided a convenient open door for Russia to now establish a presence in the Middle East, a region that it has long been absent from. Having said that, though, there are common threats that Russia faces because of terrorist organizations and radical Islam themselves. I've seen statistics that are significant fighters in ISIS are all speaking Russian as a language. That indicates Russia's got a problem as well in terms of where those people came from and where they may go back home to. So I think there's scope for discussion. This is what I alluded to earlier. We will have to see what Russia's posture is. Are they looking for a partnership with us where we can try to reestablish some type of a positive working relationship, or are they uninterested in that?
Again, an incredibly complex situation and difficult part of the world, but my sense is that Russia has not followed through on its statements with regard to pushing back on ISIS in Syria, and in fact have focused on simply protecting Assad's regime. Again, thank you for your willingness to step forward into some of these complicated situations. We are looking forward to the opportunity to working together with you going forward, and